Michael, you've had the luxury of a full week's training. How's it gone?
It's been good. We were able to, do a lot of work on the last couple of games and bring that out onto the training pitch as well, which has been, I think, very useful for us. I think it's a wee bit of a time for us to kind of reset. We had a good meeting with the players today. Sort of looked at areas where we felt we've not been good at recently in games, and obviously areas that we have been good at throughout the season, and trying to get back to that. So the training's been pretty much geared to that, and the response from the players has been excellent.
This season's largely been positive. I mean, even now you're only 4 points off third, but the last few games have been almost like one step forward and one back. How frustrated have you been with the difficulties of injuries and suspensions, which are clearly a major contributing factor?
Yeah, it's been frustrating, the injuries that we've had, and as you touch on, the suspensions, which you're always trying to avoid. But it gives opportunities to players, and maybe those players stepping in, we should have hoped for a little bit more in those situations. We've been very consistent in how we've worked, but again, sometimes when it's not easy for players stepping in when they've maybe not played for a while. But there's no doubt, particularly the last three home games, we were 3 up against Cardiff and we draw the game 3 each. We didn't play particularly well against Peterborough, but we won the game 2-0. And then obviously the result on Saturday where we didn't play well. I didn't think there was very much in the game, difficult game, but we obviously lose the game 1-0. So those are frustrations because our home form has been very, very good this season. And so we have to look to address that. If we look back at the away form, we had 2 away wins before we went to Bristol City. Arguably, we played better at Bristol City than we did in the 2 games that we won. But ultimately, we came away with a 1-0 defeat after, missing quite a few chances. So that's the frustration for us as much as anything else. We feel like we've lost points that we should have gathered, and we have to make sure that we try and address that again on Sunday.
Last Saturday saw the most rumblings of discontent of any game from the fans this season. Presumably, you'd like them to be more sensitive to the injury list. And do you feel you're better equipped this year to cope with it than last year? Because all teams have injuries, but Stoke's injuries seem to be to their most influential players.
Yeah, look, the performance on Saturday was frustrating for the supporters. It was frustrating for us. It was a bitterly cold day as well, so I can imagine sitting there wasn't a particularly pleasant experience either. And yeah, so look, we've got to create that positivity in the stadium with our performance. I think we've done that for the most part this season, particularly at home, and that's what we have to get back to. I think that we've lost key players. Yeah, that happened this last season as well. It does disrupt you a little bit, and there's a real responsibility on the players to come in to be able to perform in a similar way. And all players are different as well. They all have different strengths and weaknesses. But the main focus for us is what we do as a team, and we recognise that particularly in the last few home games, it's been difficult for the supporters because we've not made it easy for ourselves. Our own level of performance has been inconsistent, and we have to strive to get that back. Of course, we'll always say that injuries and suspension play a part in that. We've not been at our strongest, but equally we feel as a squad that we're more equipped to deal with it.
Queen's Park Rangers have had just 1 home league defeat. They're quick, they're pacey, they're strong, and they've got very good movement. They managed a 2-1 win at Derby in the last couple of minutes, and they'll probably be thinking it's a great time to play Stoke, won't they?
I think so, yeah. I think possibly, but that's a dangerous thing in the Championship, and Mark Warburton's very experienced, so I don't think he'll approach the game in that way. But you're right, they've got a little bit of consistency in their play. I think they're a good side. They had a really strong finish the second half of the season last season. They've managed to make some of those players permanent, like Johansson, for example, was a big factor in that. And they've got some very creative footballers, particularly in the middle of the pitch. So, we'll have to be at our best. We'll have to take care of the ball because they do hurt you. But equally, as I say, if we look at our recent away performances, there's a lot for us to go into the game and be positive about as well.
This time, when I ask about injuries, I'm just always hoping that one day you'll tell me it's a really good news on the injury front. You've got Joe Allen back and Tashin Oakley-Booth's fit, but how are we on the injury front?
Well, Clucas and Seema have trained this week, which has been a big positive. We just got to see how they are. Probably today was quite a heavy day for them, so we'll just see how they are reaction-wise, and whether we feel it's ready for one or both of them to be involved in the matchday squad. Seema's been out probably longer than Sam, so we need to take that into consideration as well. But at least the squad looks a bit stronger now with the two players back training. Tashan's training well this week. It's taken him a little bit of time, I think, to find his confidence and his form again a little bit after the injury. It was out. If you think his injury sort of went back to March of last season, and he's had to be very patient. But as I say, we've been pleased. The training's been good this week.
How's Jordan Thompson coming along? Because he's been really influential in the midfield when he's played.
Well, unfortunately, Jordan's not good news in Jordan. He'll need to have an operation, I think, next week, possibly. So we don't anticipate seeing Jordan. I think the time frame is possibly 6 to 8 weeks that he's going to be out now. So that was a piece of bad news, obviously, that we received this week. We had avoided trying to have to go down that route, but when he was running and tried to run, he was still having problems within his knee. So the surgeons opted to feels that the operation can solve the problem. And as I said, the time frame is probably 6 to 8 weeks.
Given that the midfield seemed to struggle a bit against Blackburn, have you considered an approach where you could perhaps use somebody like Wilmot, as Thompson's going to be missing?
Yeah, we've looked at Ben in there and going into that situation, but equally we played Josh in there, but we have Joe coming back, so possibly there's less of a need for us to do that. I think that Ben still gives us a lot in the back three, but we have that option if we need to consider it.
And it's quite clear the squad is sticking together. You've talked about you've had good meetings. Is it a matter of trying to hang in now and get through these injuries and maybe strengthening the transfer window if possible?
Yeah, I think when you go through little periods like we are at this minute in time, you have to stay together. You have to, work your way through it. Every team has these periods in the Championship, and we are disappointed, particularly, for us to look back and think how we've played this season. And yeah, I think we've lost 7 games. It's disappointing. I don't, for us to have lost as many games as that, and that. But equally, we have to, analyse the game and see where we're developing as a team as well. It's very important for us to recognise where we're trying to get to as a team. And look, the key thing is to be consistent. And I've said this many times in how we work, and the players know what we expect from them. And they're a good group of players. They work extremely hard. We're a little bit young in areas at times, but those players are developing all the time. And I think, we'll come through this period and we'll get stronger in the second half of the season.
You've signed Fielding as goalkeeper. Could you explain why you felt the need to sign another keeper?
Well, Joe's out for 10 to 12 weeks, so we've only got 2 senior keepers, which would leave us in a difficult situation if, for example, a goalkeeper was ill the day before a game and possibly couldn't play, or possibly got picked up an injury. We've seen, Joe Bursick's a good example. He got hurt in the warm-up for England. So if we only had 2 goalkeepers, that would leave us with a very, very inexperienced young goalkeeper on the bench. Young Blondie's out on loan at Crawley. We don't have the option to call him back at this minute in time. It's something we'll consider in January. And it very much like last season, where we obviously had to sign Nicky Miempo on a short-term deal, which didn't work out because he got injured in the first day, and then Andy Lonergan as a result of that. We just felt we needed a little bit of cover, and Frankie Fielding was available. It's a short-term deal, which is good for him and good for us. And as I say, we'll see how the situation looks in January. And
you've got Tom Edwards back training. How's he done so far this week?
Yeah, Tom's been good. He's come in and trained. He's obviously played a lot of games in the MLS. I think 28 games he played, which is a good for Tom. He's not had that consistency of play. He's been away from the club essentially for 18 months with the loan at Fleetwood to begin with, and he's now get a chance to show where he is at this point in his career before the transfer window opens in January.
And lastly, from me, you've got over 1,100 fans taking the trip down to London. You must be very pleased on a Sunday when it's not the easiest route if you're travelling by train for the support.
Yeah, it is. Listen, the support's been fantastic, and we recognise that. I recognise that. The players are appreciative of that, and we have to give them something. We got to make the trip enjoyable for them, which means we got to play well, and hopefully we've got to try and win the game. And obviously, we want to send them back on the train or however they get there on the coach. We want to send them back happy, and that's the aim of everyone in the building at this minute in time.
Well, we hope you're right, Michael. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ange. So if we then go George, Dave and Jim, please. So over to you, George. Please, you're muted at the moment, but...
Right, all right then. Okay, I'll take it up.
Come on, fire away. We can hear you, George. Fire away, mate.
All right. Michael, obviously you've got the highest number of yellow cards in the championship. That must be a worry in certain aspects. So obviously I'm sure you've gone in the dressing room and told them in that way, but on the pitch, your captain and Joe Allen's back. He really does have to have that relationship, because it does become a worry in many ways, doesn't it? So does Joe, obviously you do give him that authority. Is it up to him, when things get in a little bit in turmoil, to get a grip?
Well, I think it's what you pick up the yellow cards for as the concern, if you look at Joe's recent suspension was 2 yellow cards. The second one is, he's trying to retrieve the ball after losing the ball in the 95th minute of the game, and these things happen. My biggest concern is obviously, when you have a lot of bookings for dissent or bookings of that nature, and we've very few, if any, of that nature. So we are competitive. We have to be competitive. So look, we may lose 1 or 2 players from suspension. We've only, if you look at it, Joe's suspension, and I think Sam Surridge's, which was for a red card, are the only suspensions we've had this season. We're 20 games in. So whilst the count is high, we're still obviously in a situation where we've managed it so that we're not losing too many players as a result of it.
But you're very proactive in the technical area, so is Dean Holden. But to get the message across, particularly now we've got fans in the stadium, it's probably difficult to do that. So Joe has got to be your voice, hasn't he?
Well, yeah, Joe. Joe's always the voice in the team and one of the voices. But the players know themselves. Like at the end of the day, I think we've got to look at the reason why players are booked, and that's the most important thing. And as I said in my previous answer, we haven't picked up too many silly bookings, which is often a source of frustration. So we just got to make sure that possibly we time our tackles better, and the rationale why the referee has given that yellow card as well. Sometimes the yellow cards are given softly as well. So yeah, but Joe's the captain; he's well experienced. But there's other players around him as well who know how to manage that situation as well.
You moved on, as you say, in QPR, you've already alluded to, got a win in midweek. And they did have a slight blip, Michael, at the start or in the middle part of the season so far in the first quarter. But they've moved it on now, haven't they? And they're right back in the mix.
Yeah, they've like all teams, they have little periods where, possibly they're struggling for results or maybe drawing too many games. But they're in a good place at this minute in time. That they've got a bit of consistency. They've got good players. I think they've a strong finish to the second half of last season. So they've carried that on. They're in a good position. I think obviously there's very little between us and many of the teams around us. But it'll be a tough game, and they're obviously a team who have, I think, developed a lot. They've lost some players, but they've replaced them with some very good young players coming into their team as well.
But you're moving forward, and obviously it's the time really now as we hit this Christmas period to get the momentum and probably get those results which you missed out on when you say you've lost games maybe in the final stages of the game. But you're capable of doing that, Michael, aren't you?
Of course. I mean, we've lost tight games recently. We played particularly well down at Bristol City and came away with nothing. We didn't play well on Saturday, and we lost the game to really one moment from Blackburn. The game could easily have finished, as a stalemate, but they had that moment that gave them the 3 points, and so we got to look. But we have to analyse our performance and why we didn't play well, and how we have to play better and be consistent in terms of how we play. And those players who are coming in a team as a result of players possibly being out through injury or suspension, have to recognise what we want. We're consistent in how we work on the training pitch, and we had a good week training this week, and I think we'll see that reflected in the performance on Sunday.
Thank you, Michael. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, George. Dave, now please.
Hi, Michael. Is Sam Surridge available?
No, he's a 3-game ban, so Sunday's his last game.
How would you rate his progress at the club before the suspension?
I mean, he came. I think he had a really good start to life at Stoke. He settled in quite quickly and obviously scored a few goals. I think then he had a little period where his confidence was maybe dropped a little bit. Possibly, we missed a penalty against West Brom, which probably didn't help him in that situation. And he's competing with Stephen Fletcher, Jacob Brown, Tyrese predominantly, and now obviously Sima comes into the mix. But he's a young striker. This is the period where he's probably been asked to lead the line and be the number 9 more so than he has done in the past. At Bournemouth, a lot of his play was coming in from off the bench and in a strong team. So overall, we're pleased with him. He has a little bit more to do. He knows that himself, but his attitude's been very good. He works very hard, and he's only going to develop as a player.
And what's the situation with Nick Powell?
Nick we worked with the medical team today out on the grass, which is, I think, his second day doing that. So that's a positive, but he's still a few weeks away from being introduced back into training. And obviously at that point, we'll get a truer reflection on how close he is to come back to playing.
Would you say you've missed him the most?
I think Nick's an important player for us. There's no doubt about that. I think we built a lot of a team with 3 at the back, where a lot of our game was about our build-up, and we've obviously lost Harry and Joe Bursick in recent weeks, who are very important in that side of things. Nick's a very creative player. He's been scoring goals this season, and he's consistently been, in my period at the club, has been a very important player for that period of time. But I don't really like to say whether we've missed him more than any other player, but that's for other people to make that opinion.
Yeah, but you mentioned Harry, of course, as well. Would you say you've lost most of your key players?
Well, we lost important players. There's no doubt about that. We lost important players last season as well. The key is, can we cope with that as a squad? And we have to believe that we can. The injuries, particularly the likes of Harry's, is a season-ending injury for Harry. So that's a big blow to us as a team. It's any team with a player like Harry would suffer as a result of that. What we have to do is try and compensate for that with the players we have in the building, and how we compensate for that as a group as well.
Thanks. Good luck on Sunday.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Just Jim now, please.
Hi, Michael. Michael, Tom Ince, a player of real calibre, a player of real potential in his day. 4 appearances so far for Tom, 1 goal. Last 2 games he came off the bench. Do you feel that Tom Ince, there's more in him for Stoke City? Is he a player that should be producing more for you, given his technical ability?
He suffers a bit because of the system we've played. We've been, Tom's predominantly a wide player, so he played most of his career as a left-footed player, playing wide right. More often than not in a 4-3-3. We've played with a back 3 this season, which means we've played with wing backs. So when Tom has played, he's played pretty much as a wing back, which is not his natural position, but I think he's adapted to it quite well. He's got competition to play there, and he's in the last year of his contract, so he's obviously pushing to make an impression. And as I say, I'm pleased with what he does on a daily basis. It's just his opportunities to play have been limited this season.
And Michael, just in terms of your strikers there, I was just looking there for possibly your 3 main strikers: Jacob Brown, Stephen Fletcher, Sam Sturridge. So far, 20 games in, roughly 10 goals from the 3 of them combined. Are you happy with that sort of return? Were you expecting more? 5 from Jacob Brown, 3 from Stephen Fletcher, and then 2 from Sam Sturridge. would you expect maybe more at this stage of the season?
Well, we'd certainly have hoped for more. Like, you know, I think Fulham have a 20-goal striker, so there's an indication of what you're talking about. But look, we've played with 2 strikers consistently this season. I think we've created a lot of chances. Stevens had injuries, which you know held him back a little bit. But there is an onus on the strikers to obviously increase their goal tally. We see Tyrese coming back now as well, which I think will strengthen us in that department. Seaman's coming back. He's a little bit of an unknown quantity to us, but you know we haven't seen a lot of him because he picked up an injury not long after arriving at the club as well. But yeah, I think look, if you're gonna really challenge to get out of this league, you need goals, and you know that's an area of our team where we're always looking to improve, and we need to improve in that in the second half of the season.
And Michael, just on to QPR at the moment, the gap is 4 points. Is this game really pivotal in terms of if you win, the gap goes down to a point, but if you lose, the gap stretches to 7? And at this stage of the season, our team's beginning to sort of break away from the pack. So is this a real key game not to lose, really, in terms of keeping touch with Queen's Park Rangers?
Well, I don't think we're like measuring ourselves just against Queen's Park Rangers. We're measuring ourselves against the teams in the top 6 in the league, and we've been in the top 6 for pretty much all season. So QPR have got themselves into that now with a nice little run of form. But there's 26 games to go, and teams drop points in this league all the time. So we're playing a team who are on a good run of form, and we've got to get ourselves back to winning games, and we don't really see it as anything more than that.
And Michael, you mentioned Queen's Park Rangers are on a good run of form, but in terms of Ilias Chair, is he the real key component behind those sort of front 2 in terms of that creativity? And in terms of your game plan, is he a special player that you have to, on the week coming up to match, give Sparta special attention to in terms of man marking and how you deploy yourself defensively to cope with him getting into those pockets?
No, he's a very good player. He's a young player that's obviously taking his opportunity with you know Izzy moving on to the Premier League and to Crystal Palace, so that's provided him with the opportunity, and he's allowed you know QPR to be consistent in terms of how they've set their team up and how they play, and we have to look, when you play any opposition, you have to try and stop their good players. There's no secret to that, and sometimes you can do that because you deprive them of the ball. Other times you can man mark them, but our focus predominantly is always on ourselves, and we've tried to be consistent with that. That isn't being disrespectful to the opposition, but we believe that we're capable, if we play to the levels that we can go and win the game. QPR will pose an attacking threat. There's no doubt about that, and we have to make sure defensively we're strong and we can deal with that.
And finally, for me, Michael, what do you make of the job of Mark Warburton has done in Queen's Park Rangers in terms of the steady progression of that football club over the past few years with him in charge?
Well, look, he's done a very good job. Chris, you know, they're in a nice position at the minute. He's a very experienced manager in the Championship. So, yeah, he's done a good job. But my focus is on my team, my club, more than anything else.